Okay, so yippee, we're getting ready to move into talking about really labor and delivery, I guess, in the early childhood stages of parenting. And but I want to back up for just a minute because one of the things that as I was changing clothes and thinking about where we're headed, one of the things that I was also pondering that I remembered, there's always been a thing that has made me curious for a long time, well, always, in the scriptures, and that's where in this very short period of time, you see Zechariah in receiving a promise from the Lord through an angel, through Gabriel. So you see Zechariah at the temple. It's his turn to go into the Holy of Holies and offer the incense and go before the Lord there. And so you see him receiving a promise through an angel and asking the question, how can this be? And then you turn around and you see Mary receiving a promise from the angel and asking, how can this be? And the response from the angel, the response is totally different. Like, Mary's encouraged and it's explained to her, and yet in the other one you see him being struck down mute, and he's not going to be able to speak until the baby gets here. And I was like, well, what is the difference? What's the deal there? Why were both of those questions treated very differently? And I was thinking about this honestly just the other day, and I never had revelation on this. I've never understood it. And all of a sudden what I felt like the Lord was showing me is that the difference was that he was in the Holy of Holies. He was a priest that had been in the service of the Lord, been ministering to the Lord for years. I mean, he was old, right? So for years. So he's not new at this. This is in his first rodeo. And he was in the place where all that existed in there was the Holy of Holies. All that was in there was God. So to come into this place where God is and ask that question is a very different place to be than Mary, who was a woman who probably, like I said, in that culture, women weren't really taught Scripture. They weren't taught by the rabbis. So whatever she knew secondhand, or she didn't learn sitting at the feet of a scholar or someone who was educated in these things. So for her to ask that type of a question came from an innocence of impurity of how does this work? I don't know how you work, God. Like, how can that be? Because she didn't know how God worked. Well, he should have. He knew how to operate within the structure that he understood. And so I just wanted to add that piece that, I don't know why. I just felt that was curious, and I wanted to share that little bit of insight with you. But, okay, so we're moving into birth, yay, or not. And I want to start out by saying I want to be very sensitive to the fact that I know that there are possibly those of you listening, watching, that this whole topic of pregnancy and birth, it may be hard. It may be really hard because maybe that's something that you've struggled with in any number of ways. And I don't even need to name the ways. You know the ways, and the Lord's going to speak to you in those ways. So whatever the hard thing is that is potentially coming up in you as we study this, and where there may be some pain, I just want to encourage you to take that before the Lord. One of the things that I felt the Lord saying just as I was getting ready to start this segment was his promise that those who follow him, there will be no barrenness, and he is also a God of adoption. So I don't know what what that may be about, but I do know, and I can say this from the perspective that I have natural children. I have birthed natural children. I have also birthed, Jesus in my life, and I can tell you that there is no greater legacy. There's nothing greater that you will birth in your life than to birth the unique demonstration that you are of Jesus in you. And through this process, this is the greatest birthing that you will do. And I say that from a place of I've done both. And so I want to encourage you. I want to bless you. I pray the Lord's peace to fall upon you, and his comfort to be with you, whatever might be rising up that's uncomfortable and painful as we move through this. So I want to be sensitive to that. So as we move into labor and delivery, it's really interesting. I started a book, I don't know, it's probably been 2 years ago, called The Red Tent. And it's just a novel. It's a fiction. It's kind of historically, scripturally based. It's not scripturally accurate. You just kind of get over those things. It's because that's not what the book's about. But it does, there's a lot of like rich culture, and you know that it's written from a perspective of the culture of that day. And so it's a very fascinating book. And it's called The Red Tent, and I put it down, and then just a few weeks ago, I ran across it again because I'd started reading it and never finished it. And so I picked it back up again, and I felt like I heard the Lord say this, really just a matter of a few days ago. There's never been a bloodless birth. I want you to think about that. There's never been a bloodless birth. I mean, we know that Jesus' blood was shed, like there is so much power in the blood that he shed. But this whole thought that in order to even give birth, it requires both blood and water. I mean, that's what came out of Jesus when he died and they pierced his side, was blood and water flowed out. Well, blood and water are required for birth. The baby is nurtured in the uterus. The whole thing is, the baby is in water while it grows and it develops, and its lifeline through the umbilical cord is blood. But then when the baby's birthed, blood and water are birthed also. So there's never been a bloodless birth. So I'm still kind of chewing on that and pondering that. I think that there's probably some more depth to that I'm not even fully grasping yet. So ponder that with me. It's an interesting thing. But I wanted to read this specific excerpt. Is that right? Excerpt from The Red Tent. Because as I was reading it the other day, after this had just been spoken to me, this just leapt off the pages at me. So this book is based on the character in the Bible, the character of Dinah. And if you remember, Jacob he had 2 wives, and their maidservants were all wives and all birthed children for him. So there was Leah and Rachel, and there was Leah's maidservant and Rachel's maidservant. But Dinah was his daughter that was born. So we hear a lot about the sons of Jacob, but Dinah was his daughter. And there's a little bit in scripture about Dinah, and this book kind of takes that little piece, that little nugget about Dinah, and expands it into this story, which it's just a fun read. So, but Dinah is in labor. So, and she in this story, she had helped Rachel and another midwife, so she had midwife skills before she ever had children of her own. She had served as a midwife to various women, and so anyway, I'll just start reading, and if I need to explain something, I will. So this is Dinah speaking. Why had no one told me that my body would become a battlefield, a sacrifice, a test? Why did I not know that birth is the pinnacle where women discover the courage to become mothers? But of course, there is no way to tell this or to hear it. Until you are the woman on the bricks, you have no idea how death stands in the corner ready to play his part. Now, on the bricks, culturally in those days, very different from today in our hospital beds, but they stood on bricks to where they were elevated to where they could squat and there'd be room for the baby to be delivered. So that's, maybe this is TMI, but this is good. This is how this worked back then. So that's what that on the bricks means. That's how they birthed back then. So until you are the woman on the bricks, you do not know the power that rises from other women. I wept and I yelled. I gave up all hope and I prayed. I vomited and my knees buckled. But even though their brows furrowed in response to my pains, none of them appeared worried or anxious. So I fought on, reassured. Then I began to push because there was nothing else I could do. And those of you that have, that's the truth. It's not a choice. When labor comes, it's not a choice. I pushed and I pushed until I thought I would faint. I pushed and still the baby did not come. Time passed. More pushing. No progress. Merritt looked up at Renefer, and these are two of the women that are there with her, and I saw them exchange a glance that I had seen pass between Rachel and Enna at moments such as this, when the ordinary passage of life into life became a struggle between life and death, and I felt the shadow in the corner lean toward me and my son. See, she knew she was having a son. She knew that she was in the process of delivering a son. No, I screamed, first in my mother tongue. No, I said, in the language of the women around me. Mother, I said to Renefer, bring me a mirror so I can see for myself. Remember, she's a midwife, so she's experienced in this. Let me see what's going on. I was brought a mirror and a lamp that showed me the tautness of my own skin. Reach in, I said to Merritt, remembering Enna's practice. I fear he has turned away. Reach in and turn his face, his shoulder. Merritt tried to do as I asked, but her hands were too large. My skin was too tight. My son was too big. Bring a knife, I said, almost screaming. He needs a bigger doorway. Renefer translated, and Harriet answered her in a grave whisper. There is no surgeon in the house, daughter, Renefer explained to me in turn. We will send for one now, but the words came to me from far away. All I wanted to do was empty myself of this boulder to expel the agony and sleep or even die. My body cried out to push, but when the shadow in the corner nodded approval, I refused to obey. You do it, I said to Merritt. Take a knife and open the way for him, please, I begged, and she looked at me in uncomprehending pity. A knife, Mother, I screamed, desperate. Rachel, where are you? Enna, what shall I do? Renefer called out, and a knife was brought. Merritt took it fearfully. As I screamed and struggled to keep from pushing, she put the blade up to my skin and opened the door, front to back, as I had seen it done before. She reached up to move the baby's shoulder. The pain was blinding, as though I had sat upon the sun itself. In an instant, the baby was out. But instead of a joyful shout, he was greeted by silence. The cord was at his neck. His lips were blue. Merritt hurried. She cut the cord from his throat and took up her reeds, sucking death from his mouth, blowing life into his nostrils. I was screaming, sobbing, shaking. Hirya held me as we all watched the midwife work. The shadowy dog's head of death moved forward, but then the baby coughed and with an angry cry banished all doubts. The dark corner brightened. Death does not linger where he is defeated. That whole passage just settled over me and brought so many things to mind in the context of this whole spiritual process, this journey that we're in, and the struggles and the pain and the journeymen. In this case, these were women. It's that nurturing that we surround ourselves with, and men should have journeymen that encourage. It's all about encouraging and helping us push and all of those things. So that is what this whole birthing process, there's so much, not just in the nurturing as it's growing, but the process of actually delivering is blood, sweat, and tears. Really, blood, sweat, and tears. There is no bloodless birth. So there's pain. There can be pain, and it can be hard. But all along the way, when you know the process of what's going on, there is this hopeful expectancy about, that on the other side of this, there's going to be this amazing wonder, this identity, this child, this destiny that you're birthing, right? So the other things that came to mind at this point in my journey as I pondered things about Mary that the Lord was putting in my heart, which is kind of funny, because Mary pondered things in her heart, and I spent a lot of time pondering Mary, was what this looked like for Mary and Joseph as parents. I mean, once the baby was birthed, this whole early childhood phase of parenthood with this promise, with this thing that they've birthed, and what that looks like to nurture that. So one of the things that I really found fascinating is how God was so active in ensuring that the promised son was protected. Through dreams, he guided Joseph to remove his son from threats. So God moved in, and there were several times, Joseph was told to take the child to Egypt, and then from Egypt take the child back here. So it was all about, even once they felt like they had this promise, in their hands, they still had to follow the Lord. Well, okay, the Lord wants the promise now over here, and because he knows the threats that are going on that we don't see. They had no idea that Herod had this whole plan. God knew that. So it was still listening to God every step of the way and moving back. So there's this sense of protection for escaping threats. And, one of the things about, I'll just share this, and really the Lord spoke this to me in context of being a wife, but he went back to this stage of being a parent, because Proverbs talks about raising up a child in the way that he or she should go, and he will not depart from that. And I always understood that in the context of that we raise up the child in the ways of the Lord and in truth, so that as they grow and mature, they don't depart from that truth, and they walk in a way of following the Lord and in the right character. But what the Lord showed me is that that's truth. That is true. But the bigger picture, and it's really demonstrated in how God worked in Joseph and Mary, is that, and you think about it, they're nurturing and caring for the Son of God. we can't do that. We can't parent our children without God, because God is the only one that knows the unique destiny and the plan and his purpose for each one of our children, and they're all different. And if you have children, more than one, you know that they're not the same. None of them are the same. My boys are night and day difference. They've got a lot of similarities, but there are a lot of things about them that are, exact opposites. And so the Lord is the only one that knows his plans for that child and what he's put into each individual, including you as a child. He's the only one that knows what he has placed within you. And so as a parent, it's our responsibility to seek the Lord for his plans for that child, just like it is our responsibility. If we weren't parented that way, let me just say this: if we weren't parented that way, we can seek the Lord for his plans for us, right? And I can tell you that I didn't parent this way. I began this journey for me 5 years ago, so I trust that the Lord is going to show my children, and it's not too late for him to show me. So I know how to encourage my boys now, even though they're really adults. So I didn't do this when they were little, so we don't get all hung up and bent out of shape about those things, because God's bigger than that. But the thing is if you know this, if you know this early on, what a blessing, because you find out from the Lord what have you placed in this child, what are the gifts, what are you calling this child into, how can I help this child develop and grow and nurture the things that you've put in them, and give them opportunities to grow in those and strengthen those gifts and those talents, so that they will be prepared for the destiny that you have them to walk. So you really see Joseph and Mary, God just kind of moves in and guides them where they need to be, what they need to, where they need to be taking this promise from one place to the next. I also love about the shepherds and the kings. I love that the Lord's, the thing about the kings is that the Lord's provision for this child was already on its way. The Lord already has everything that you need for your journey. All the provision for your life, he already knows what it is. He's had it all along. He knows where it's going to come from. So that was another part in this, is that Joseph and Mary were surrounded by people. The shepherds came to acknowledge, and it was just again another way of confirming who their son was. These people from nowhere were coming to worship and recognize their son. There were prophecies. This is another thing. There were prophetic voices. Simeon and Anna, early on after Jesus' birth, there were prophetic voices that encouraged Mary and Joseph, again confirming who Jesus was and the plans for his life. One of the stories in the Bible, though, that absolutely as I thought about it, it made me giggle. If you have ever been a mother, especially with a toddler, I think about this with a toddler, and I know my oldest son, I don't know what his fascination with, we'd go to stores like Target or somewhere like that, and he used to like to collect those little sock hangers and things like that. Like, he'd love to find those things on the floor. So I'd be shopping and I'd turn around and I could not find him anywhere, and he'd be under some clothes rack somewhere picking up some little thing that he found on the floor, and his little treasures, the little things that fascinate children. I just love it. But there have been times when I've turned around and there's that panic. Oh my gosh, I've lost my child. Well, I think about Mary and Joseph when they go to Jerusalem, and they've lost Jesus. He's like 10 or 12 at the time, or I think he's 12 at the time. He's 12, he's in the temple, but it's like a day. They've traveled for a day, and when they settle for the night, because they traveled with a whole group of extended family, they realize that he's like not there. And can you imagine the panic? I mean, I know mine as a mother when I've lost my son, but they've lost the Son of God. It just makes me giggle. I can't even imagine what that must have been like. How do you go before God and say, oh my gosh, what are we going to tell God? We've lost his son. And of course they go back and they find him. And that's another piece of scripture that's always kind of puzzled me. Because you kind of wonder, Jesus only did what he heard, he was learning, he grew in obedience. So he was always obedient to his Father. And he obviously knew the law to honor your father and your mother. So what was this whole thing about? And I really sense that as I've sat with it, that the Father, God the Father, was there was the beginning of a shift. Jesus was 12, and for those of you who have parented into the beginning of or even through teenage years, this is the age where children for the first time kind of start to wake up to the world around them. They start to realize that they're an individual in the world. So it's kind of the first time they even see the world and experience the world outside of themselves. And so it's a shifting in relationships. That's the point where, especially in boys, boys need to detach from their mamas to become men. It's just a part of the process. But so I feel like Jesus knew that it was time for things to shift. Things were getting ready to change, and that was his place. He knew that the temple and being about his Father's business was what he was shifting into. So, I don't know. Obviously, I wasn't present, but I don't feel in any way that Jesus was dishonoring. Can it be alarming to parents when that shift starts to happen? Absolutely. I can't tell you how many times I've been like, I'll be sitting right in the room with one of my sons going, where did he go? I mean, especially my youngest one, who was, and always has been, I've always thought he was my duck, because everything just kind of rolls off of him, and he's just always a very happy, positive, just sunshine. But when he hit this stage, there just was this brooding that seemed to come over him. And I was just like, where did he go? And so I think, that's part of this process as well. You may feel that about yourself as you're going on this journey. It's like, what happened to me? What's going on with me? I mean, I know I went through a place, a long season, and I used to tell people, I am not the fun friend. Everything just feels so intense. And so, I was so at a place in my journey where I was so intense on seeking and understanding, and I was having fun. To me it was fun, but that intensity, there were many people that just, that level of intensity of my seeking was very uncomfortable for them. And then I had others that were just as intensely seeking, and it was fun to us. So, you're going to see shifts in this child that you're carrying, this promise, the identity, the destiny that is unfolding for you. There's going to be changes throughout. And then I also thought of this, that, Mary there were other children. Jesus had brothers and sisters. And I think about what was that like, to be a mother to other children who aren't the Son of God. Is there favoritism? Is there all of those things? So those were just some, as I sat in this place in my journey, the things that I pondered and sat with the Lord about, and really thought, what does this mean in the spiritual context? Even this whole thing, just the other day, when this comment about there's never been a bloodless birth, I thought, okay, well, what is this in the spiritual then? What is what is considered, if you will, our blood in the spiritual when we're in the process of birthing. And the sense that I got, and I'm still pondering this, I'm still chewing on it. The sense that I got is what I feel he's showing me is that our birth is brought forth through tears as we bring our pain and the things that are hurts from the past that maybe we've been feeding on ourselves, and we bring that before him. He's able to use, as he heals us, he's able to use our tears and the things that have wounded us as a part of this nurturing process of what he's bringing forth. So I think the blood and the tears, our hurts and our tears are the blood and the water for the things that we're birthing. And I feel that that's what he's showing me, and I'm still sitting with it. I'm still on the journey. I'm not speaking to you from a place of someone who's ended their journey. I'm still journeying, and as even as I sit and do this with you, more things are coming, and things that I haven't thought about before are coming. So, okay, so I've enjoyed this time with you, and where are we going? Okay, so the next time we meet, we're going to really talk about parenthood from the point of those teenage years where there starts to be that separation till the point of really release and separation. So we want to study parenthood, but I want you to study really the word encourage, and see what the Bible has to say about encourage and encouragement, and then any insights that you want to dig into about what parenting from being a teenager, and that, starting to move into maturity and releasing, because we're taking the promise from, the promise is starting to mature. We need to, how does the release of that look like? Because we're releasing it from us then out to the world. So there's a birthing where it's growing in us, and then we're carrying that promise and, really understanding what this promise is about, and then, until we release, and it takes on a life of its own. So we're in the phase of parenthood and encourage. So anyway, so have fun studying about that and learning what it's like, and think, your own life may be a great study for you in this. I mean, what was it like for you in that stage of your own life being parented? I mean, you could do it from both perspectives. What was it like to be parented at that point in your life? And what has it been like if you have parented children at that stage? So that might be an interesting twist on the study. So anyway, I've enjoyed our time together, and I look forward to our time again next time.